It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, gotta live diverse. It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, live diverse. You are listening to The Lens Living Diverse, a podcast brought to you by the CNIB advocacy team. Join Neisha and I as we talk to guests with intersecting identities along with sight loss as they share the unique stories. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Lens Living Diverse. And I am one of your hosts, Ben.
And I'm your host, Neisha.
I'm very excited for today's episode for sure. We got a really awesome episode with a special guest definitely known throughout the sight loss community, the one and only Kamini. I feel like we need like intro music.
Yay.
Yeah. How you doing today, Kamini?
Very well. Thank you for having me here.
Excellent. And this is a great episode because we're going to be talking about living abroad with sight loss. And this is a topic that's not really brought up too much, you know what I mean?
Oh, I totally agree. Yep.
Yeah. So you're gonna incite us with your experience, and we're gonna also share as well. So, Kamini, we're gonna start it off by asking you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the intersectionality and or the intersecting identities that you hold.
Oh boy, what can I talk about myself? All right. So I guess I should start with maybe describing myself a little bit. I am West Indian from Guyana. Ethnic background is East Indian. I came here in 2001 with my family, and it's been a real interesting journey so far.
It must have been a really big culture shock, or even a weather shock when you got here.
Oh my God, yeah. Everything was a shock. The whole lifestyle, whether it was the weather or the culture, everything. I didn't want to be here. And the funny thing is, when we came, I did not realize, because I was a kid, right? I was only 11, close to 12. I didn't realize at the time that we were moving here to live. I was thinking, oh, we're going to visit for a couple of weeks and I'll be back home. Nope, that didn't happen.
Can you imagine? Just be like, yo, we're going to visit Canada. Next thing you know, it's all your stuff's there. And you're still like getting there. So I even got to ask you, just out of curiosity, did you come during the winter?
No, I came in the fall at the end of September. So it was starting to get cold by then, but not quite winter yet.
Yeah, okay. At least you didn't come from like two contrasts where it's like nice weather in Guyana and then boom, like you're in the winter seasons.
So what was it like growing up in Guyana with sight loss? And were there any resources or services available to you while you were in school or just getting around and being a kid?
So, I mean, I would say I had a pretty happy childhood, mostly because of my friends. But when it came to sight loss, there is, first, I should say, I didn't come from the main city, which is Georgetown. I came from a small village, which is pretty small. You have probably a few hundred people in one village. And there is literally no resources there for people with sight loss or, in fact, people with any kind of disability. And in terms of life there, when you have a disability, and in my case, visually impaired, there was no expectation for me. There was no resources. I couldn't go to school. They tried to put me in school for a few months, but the teachers had no idea what to do with me. I just sat there and pretty much just made friends and talked to my classmates. But yeah, and as far as I know, it's kind of still like that today too. There really isn't any resources in that area of the country where the villages are. So I didn't get an education until I came here. I learned everything from the beginning when I moved to Canada.
So, I mean, being in school, they didn't teach you how to read. They weren't teaching how to write. None of that because of your sight loss. Did they attempt you anything?
I think they attempted a little bit. They would try to sit with me for a few minutes and do a little bit of spelling or try to get me to write something. But I guess they didn't like the way I did it, or they didn't think I could do it because they have no training, right? They have no idea how to deal with someone with sight loss or any kind of disability. So they had no idea how to go about even teaching someone. They just wanted to see what I knew. And I didn't really know anything, and they didn't know how to teach me. So I just sat there most of the time.
I know I don't come from Trinidad. My parents are Trinidadian, and I know when I've reached out to them to find out what it's like there, they've said, oh, kids or adults with sight loss, they just go into programs and they make baskets every day. But there is an organization in Trinidad for people with sight loss. There's nothing like that in Guyana.
So I found out, I think about 8 years ago, that there is an organization called the Guyana Society for the Blind in the main city of Georgetown that's been there for decades and decades, but I had never heard of it because I don't live near the city or in the city. So I'm finding there is some things now or even back then, but it's only within a small area of the country. But what about everybody else? Nobody else knows that these things even exist. So there was a small amount of people that even learned Braille and got educated. And when I hear about these people, I'm like, wait a second. How and when did you learn that? We had no idea that even existed there. And a lot of people still don't.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
And it's very interesting because we look at here in Canada or even North America, and we have people who are specialists when it comes to individuals with sight loss or blindness or partial sight. And looking back at Guyana and your experiences, were those people specifically trained, or was it just, here's a person living with a disability, let's get them through school?
I don't, as far as I know, I don't think anybody was really trained in terms of teachers. What I've also heard is that some of these people that try to teach people down to a disability, they're not Guyanese. They came from overseas. So for example, maybe the States or maybe England, a couple of people went there through different organizations to teach people. And that's how some of those people got to learn some things and got some sort of education.
That's actually an interesting dynamic, eh? Yeah, it almost adds that kind of power imbalance where it's already like, okay, not even your own people are teaching you. We have to bring in other people to teach a person who's a citizen of Guyana. Yeah, wow, that blows my mind.
Mine too.
My goodness. And it's just definitely interesting. And I feel like I'm going to put this out into the world right now for the listeners. Ghana, that's where my parents are from, Ghana. Not Guyana. and my friend Kamini is not from Ghana. So it's in the Caribbean. I'm West African. My parents are West African. So
don't worry.
It's very interesting where I find that in Ghana, I don't believe it was like services, like what I've heard and what my parents, when they described sight loss, it was the fact that you would stay home, right? And I believe now, similar to what you're saying, Kamini, in the big city of Accra in Ghana, that's where they have the blind school.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious one day, what I want to do is go to Ghana and actually visit and see how they're different from us and how they tend to their services, right?
Well, I guess they've come a long way, or I guess at least halfway, because yeah, you're right. We were not expected to have a life. When you have a disability, you're just expected to stay at home and live with your family, not even get married, not have children, nothing, not go to school. You're just expected to stay home with your family for the rest of your life. And that's pretty much it.
Is that how your family treated you when you were growing up in Guyana? Did they tell you to stay indoors and you couldn't run around and play, or they really sheltered you and made you feel different, or were they open and they were like, explore, have fun, be Kamini? Like, how was it like growing up?
So I was I was definitely allowed to go out and explore and have friends, but just in the villages. But because I didn't and also having a sheltered life as well. But because my parents, they're not like highly educated people. They're mostly they come from farming backgrounds, so they're farmers. Because they didn't know a lot, they didn't know what exactly to do with me. But in terms of the expectation, I wasn't expected to do much with my life. Their thinking was that when I grew up, I was just gonna live at home with them and be safe and protected. It was more of a protecting thing because they didn't know how to go about getting me the assistance that I needed or I should get. But I was allowed to play and go around the village. And I had quite an adventure riding bikes, climbing trees, and all that. I was able to play like a normal child. And that's why earlier I said my childhood was pretty fun. But yeah, other than that, there wasn't much more to do.
Yeah, I could totally imagine. I could imagine Kamini just jumping from tree to tree and just like being a wild
That's
child.
exactly what I did.
No. And I'm going to even turn this question to you, Neisha. And I know that you were Canadian born, but is there any stories that you hear as well back in Trinidad when it comes to kind of the schooling or people who are growing up? I know you mentioned the weaving program, but is there anything that your parents or family members shared with you regards to that?
No, not really, actually. I just remember when I was going on my sight loss journey and my mom reached out to my aunt in Trinidad and was like, well, what do they do there? And that's when the basket weaving program came up. But in terms of education, no, she has never, no one has ever said anything to me back home about what happens to individuals with sight loss in the school system. But there's one podcast that I listened to, a gentleman from Trinidad who chronicles his life through his podcast. And he was saying that there's quite there's a lot of people in Trinidad with sight loss, but you never see them. And it's because they tend to be at home. Their parents or their family just keeps them secure inside for safety reasons, because I don't know if Kamini could relate to this, but roads in Trinidad are they're bad. Not everywhere is there a traffic light. The sidewalk is not leveled with the road. So it's not really the safest. And in a lot of communities, there are no sidewalks. There is no proper pedestrian infrastructure. So people are just worried that, walking with your cane, that's not really going to help you. You could walk right into the road. So you tend to just stay at home and be with your family. And if you need to go somewhere, you're always going with somebody. And if you are going with somebody, you're probably not using your cane if you need one.
And it's interesting with that because it's like, even if you're holding a cane and as adventurous as you are and as exploratory as you want to be, it's just purely dangerous because no one's going to like stop. And I don't know if you found this in Guyana, if you could fill us in, Kamini, but you're holding a cane, you're crossing the streets. I don't know if anybody's going to be like, oh, he has a cane or she has a cane. Like, I'm going to be careful. Maybe people might, right?
Yeah, no, Neisha's completely right about the infrastructure there. Unfortunately, it's like that in a lot of country down there, and Guyana is the same way, especially in the villages area. In the countryside, there is literally no traffic light. There's just one road, and sometimes some of the roads are not even paved. You're just walking on plain dirt. So it's just either you have some pavement, some road, and some grass. So it's not the safest. She's right. A lot of people just stay indoors because it's just really hard to get around without somebody, because infrastructure is just not there. It's just not really safe to walk around. They don't have all the things, not even half the things that we have here.
It's interesting because I would like to go to Trinidad maybe next year, and that will be my first time going since losing my sight. And I've had band members say to me, "Don't use your cane." It's like it's not going to matter, you know?
Yeah. So unfortunately, this is the thing. Some people are not going to like this, but because of people's mentality down there, they're just closed-minded enough that they don't want you using your cane because people are going to look at you funny or look at them funny because it's basically you're supposed to hide your blindness. It's because it's shameful, it's embarrassing, and they don't want people to know about it, unfortunately. And it's like, well, why?
Yeah.
We don't have a problem with it. We're trying to live life out here. But going back to, let's say you're walking outside with a cane and whether somebody's going to help you or not. Yes, they'll come up to you and say, why are you outside? Go home, go inside. You should be home. You should be inside. You should be out here. They just don't really want you to be seen. And especially if your disability is visible and having a white cane, just plainly tell people you can't see, and they don't want people knowing that.
Well, even an aspect or a dynamic to that too, maybe potentially it could be safety too, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, because even like we sometimes abroad, people are not as educated in a certain sector, and they see someone blind or partially sighted, they assume like, okay, this is a target, you know what I mean? Like I could maybe perhaps take it back or rob or something, you know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe that's where the belief systems come from for the people, family members, like you're gonna get hurt or you're gonna get robbed. So
because once they see you with a cane or with a disability, you're vulnerable right there, right? So anybody can take advantage. So that's another big thing there, because people do steal, they do try to take advantage, and that's just the thing that happens, and they try to protect you from that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because the people who are multi-generational Canadians, and I remember working at a blind school and having a conversation with one of my students, and he was making mention like, oh, like, or the school, the school that I'm in, it's like a jail, like da 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 da. We can't do much. And I remember I was like, oh, you folks are very, very, very lucky, right?
Oh yeah.
To have these resources. And I guess that kind of amalgamates into the next question in the behaviors and attitudes towards people with sight loss abroad. And I guess we touched base with that for sure. But Neisha, I'm going to throw this to you. Like, what are those for those people who are Canadian and haven't really seen that perspective of people born abroad with sight loss?
So from what I've been told, from what I understand, because I'm really excited to go to Trinidad, because I just want to test out walking in the streets with my cane.
Hold on, you don't want to go to Ghana? You don't want to go Guyana? You don't want to...
I would go there. I would go anywhere. I love to travel. I would go anywhere. I just want to test it. I just want to whip up my cane and see what happens and see what people do, what kind of response I get. But actually, I'll give this example. I just recently came back from the Dominican Republic, and I stayed on a resort with family, but we did do a couple of excursions, and I used my cane while out in those excursions. And I have to say, I wasn't, from what I could tell, and I asked my family, I wasn't given any looks. No one was like, oh, she has a cane, oh, you know, or some things were said to my family, but they were from other visitors from the States. Like they would ask, oh, what happened to her eyes? Or they would even ask me what happened to my eyes. But no one who lived in Dominica, from what I could tell, Dominican Republic, who I interacted with, said anything about me. They were very helpful. I remember being on the resort and trying to find my way and using my cane because I'm by myself. And some of the resort attendants, they helped me. And then there was one point where I was getting on a boat and I had to put my cane away, and the guy was telling me, come, come, come. And I was trying to tell him I couldn't see. And because he didn't speak English, I'm like, what? So I just took my hands and I covered my eyes. He's like, oh, okay. and he helped me. But I mean, I was only there for a week. I mean, if I was out more in the city, maybe I would have encountered, different kinds of responses. But attitudes seem pretty okay in terms of coming from Trinidad. I think my family is very open. A lot of them have studied or in Canada and gone back to Trinidad. So I think their perception of sight loss is a bit different. But like I was saying earlier, the attitudes to a lot of people with sight loss is the need to protect them and shelter them and keep them inside. And so that's kind of how things are. But I have to agree with Kamini when she says that they'll probably be like, what are you doing out here? Why are you out here and if you're by yourself, that's another set of drama, So I think it's that whole, it's not safe for all the reasons that you guys mentioned, and it shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't be taken advantage of because I can't see. That's scary. But the Caribbean is a different beast altogether when it comes to crime. But that's another topic for another day.
Just the whole lifestyle in general, it's just very, very different from here.
Yeah, and definitely true. And I guess even jumping off of kind of Neisha's explanation, Kamini, I'm going to throw this to you. Do you feel that, especially in Guyana, that it's getting better, where people are starting to get more aware, or people are more educated about sight loss?
I think it's definitely true for certain parts of the country, especially the city, obviously, and surrounding areas of the city. But in like rural areas and countryside areas, it's still not there. They still have a lot of improvements to make in that way, in whether it's education or just building awareness and changing people's attitudes about certain things, because it's just not really talked about. And I feel like to make a real change, you have to be having those types of conversations and talking about those things openly.
I agree with you completely. And I think on top of that is having that representation with sight loss to express to those communities, right? Because I almost feel, and I could be wrong, I'm open for anybody to be like, shut up, Ben, you're lying. But I almost feel that when people hear it and not even exactly their own language, but hear from someone who they could really connect with, they can relate to, it sounds a little different. So doing advocacy abroad and being like, here's me who lives in Canada, I have this cane, I'm thriving, right? And the people who have sight loss in your communities, they could be thriving too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it just needs to be seen, you know what I mean?
At first I thought you said I'm driving. It feels like he's driving.
You're driving.
That's what I'm gonna do. I'll be taking a picture with me driving with my cane and everything, and be like, "Yo, Black people could drive in Canada. You know that? You know. So let your people drive." So, no, I have another question. Everybody's open to answer this as well. Adjusting to Canadian culture from coming abroad. So, is it on top of that? I guess the first part of the question is adjusting to Canadian culture, but is there anything that you miss in Guyana, just in general, after coming to Canada?
Of course, the weather. you can't beat hot weather all year long.
But there's no snow in Guyana?
No, it's just hot all year long. You're kidding, right?
The day it snows in Guyana is a day we should all be worried. Okay?
Yeah, we should. But I think there are other parts as well that I miss, because for me it was a total change coming from a village to a city. Oh my God. Because I had my own circle of friends there and I didn't find it hard to make friends. And I had more of a community feel there because you have all the neighbors and everybody, you live like family and friends. And it was easier for me to make friends and go around the community. And I had more of a community feel. Whereas when I came here, I kind of just shut down because nobody really taught me about how it was going to be here. And even after I came here, nobody really sits you down and explains the culture to you and kind of takes you out and shows you things. So I just kind of shut myself down and I just started thinking more negatively and going back to thinking about all the things that went wrong in my life before instead of all the happy times, which there was a lot of those. So it was just everything that was shocking to me. And it took a long time. I think it probably took, I would say, maybe 10 years for me to completely get used to Canada. And I even for a long time, I wanted to go back there and live because I just kept thinking about it and I was just happier there. But I tried going back and spending some time to see if that was a possibility. And it's not, because there was no way that I could live there and have an independent life. And as a woman, and having an independent life there as a woman, that's not really possible. And I came back here and I said, you know what? Most of my family's here and I'm going to try to get used to life here and move on and actually build a life here. So I've just been really focusing on that for the past while. But it took me a long time to adjust to the life here in Canada.
Wow. So,
Yep.
wow.
I know, a lot again.
What did you do differently when you returned after your trip to Guyana?
I changed my attitude about things because I wanted to have a life. I said I want to go out, I want to do things, and I want to be able to live an independent life. So whereas before I was just afraid of everything. I was just afraid of everything. I wouldn't come out of my room. So when I came back, I decided I'm going to take O&M lessons. And at the time, I didn't know if I would really use it, but I said, I'm going to take O&M lessons and learn how to travel and learn how to get around my neighborhood and take some daily living skills, learn how to do more things at home, such as cooking and all that. And then it kind of just went from there. And slowly I started meeting friends or making friends and going out and socializing. And it kind of went from there. I just decided that I can't stay locked up forever. That's not really a life. I want more out of life.
This is through the grapevine. We're going to make it official. Kamini, I hear that you're an amazing cook, by the way. So yeah, I heard it. I heard it. I don't know what I have my resources. I have my sources. So for the listeners, Kamini is an amazing cook. She should have her own restaurant. You know what I mean? I'll be there every day.
Well, thank you.
And amazing points that you brought up earlier when you made mention that coming from Guyana and then coming to Canada, you felt homesick, right? You
very much
felt culture shocked. You as a woman and all those intersectionalities where it makes me wonder, or not wonder, but it makes me look at the services provided as organizations that do deal with sight loss. Sometimes we just look at these organizations or people providing services like, okay, I'm just teaching Kamini about how to cook, or I'm just teaching Kamini on how to travel. But then they're forgetting that cultural aspect where it's like, I'm from Guyana, I want to learn how to cook traditional Guyanese food. You know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, we're just giving her the basics of let's teach her how to cook macaroni and cheese. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to pass this to yourself, Kamini, and then I'm going to pass this to Neisha. So do you think like trading or awareness of kind of those outside factors need to be done when it does come to delivering these services?
Yeah, I think they have tried to incorporate that because when I started cooking lessons, for example, we would, yes, make Canadian dishes, but then they would ask me about what we cook at home and if I wanted to try making that. So they have tried to incorporate some of those things in it to get a cultural aspect as well, so that you can cook the foods that you're used to eating at home as well.
I think for me, I didn't get that.
Oh,
Unfortunately, I think it's because my trainer maybe wasn't aware of what kinds of techniques, like what kinds of, food is customary of my background. So that was never asked of me. And when you're new to sight loss and you're navigating the space, for me, I didn't think about that at first. I didn't think I could ask my my instructor, oh, can you teach me how to make curry shrimp or shrimp curry? Whatever, And I remember even when it came to, like, I'm a Black woman with, natural hair, and I wanted to know how to organize my hair care products. And, women of color, we got a lot of hair products, so,
yeah.
and my instructor just looked at the bin and was like scared, and she didn't know what to do, where to start. And the same thing happened with the spices in my spice rack. Like, we use a lot of different spices, a lot of different seasonings. And the person helping me said to me, oh, we'll have to get your family involved to organize this. Or maybe, she's like, maybe just get your own separate cabinet away from what they were using. So there was kind of this, separation, trying to separate me in a way from, not, I don't want to say my culture, but just trying to separate the difficulty of navigating that space, or those spaces that pertained to my background. And it just made me think that, I've got to do things differently, or I can't submerge myself in my roots the way I've been accustomed to doing so. And then the same thing with O&M training. For my background, having a cane is like, oh, you don't need it. Remember, we were saying before, you don't use a cane in Trinidad. So what, coming here, my family kind of adopted the same mentality. Oh, you don't need a cane. We'll help you. We'll take you. We'll guide you. And this look on my instructor's face was like, well, how could they do that to you? Why would they take away your independence? But it's what they've grown up knowing, right? Like, I think, instructors in this industry have to look at it, as Ben was saying, from all angles. That yes, we have sight loss, but yet we're from the Caribbean, we're from Africa, we're from China, and what happens back home is totally different than what is experienced here.
And they don't know any better. That's all they know, right? But if I can share something quickly on the whole O&M, when you said working with your O&M and your family said you didn't need a cane. Same thing here. My family doesn't understand the cane, but my dad, he has always been the most understanding and the most supportive, even when he didn't think I could do things, but he would never not let me try. He would still let me try. And I remember that one of my teachers when I was in school, invited him on an O&M lesson so that he could see how capable I am, because he would always grab my arm whenever we had to step down or step up a stair or a curb or something. And then he tried to grab my arm, and my teacher said, no, she's fine, she can do it. And he just let me do it, and he could see that I could do it. And then he was fine. And it was the same thing when it came to daily living skills. For a year, he was saying, no, she can't cook, but I was boiling rice and doing other things because he didn't believe that it could be done. He didn't really believe in my capabilities, but he never stopped me from doing it. And eventually it got to the point that instead of saying, no, you can't do that, he would ask, how did I do that? So because of me, he learned a lot of things as well.
That's beautiful. And I feel like, and we did mention this in the past, I know past episode, just by doing, sometimes that's the best way of advocacy. I mean, That is the best. And another example, and I definitely believe that these gaps in between that culture and sight loss can definitely be filled in. It's not impossible, you know what I mean? Something that I find very interesting, and it's common for people who do come abroad where they have sight loss and they see guide dogs and they're like, yeah, I'm not having that in my home. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because, this is a tool that could definitely help you out. But people are like, oh, how could you not like a guide dog and it can help you? But I think that lack of understanding that culturally, like you have in Ghana, dogs are outside, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Dogs
Not
will,
inside. They stay outside.
dogs will come. If you have a dog inside, oh my gosh, people will be like, wait, what's going on? You know what I mean? So I find that very interesting because it's that cultural gap and people will have those beliefs, but automatically people are like, how can you not like a guide dog and it's a guide dog and it's this, and it's quickly an issue. But I feel like when that education, that gap is filled from both sides, people start to understand, okay, culturally, I know it's not allowed inside, but here in Canada or North America or any other countries, it's a tool, it's helpful, right? And then vice versa, that understanding culturally, I understand that you coming from a different country and dogs are seen in a different way, right?
Oh, definitely. It's definitely about education and understanding and having perspective. And I think once you have that, people tend to be better and more accepting of someone with the guide dog or someone with the cane and sight loss in general. I think, we just have to. And I always say to people in the community that there is no better people than to do this than us. I don't think it's fair for us to depend on the able bodied or sighted community to always be advocating for us. Why can't we do it? Because we know what we need and what we want. We are the best people to advocate for ourselves, and then that will build on that.
Very well said. The more that we are present in these spaces where in the past we have been sheltered from, the better things will get when it comes to accessibility and inclusion.
Preach. And know what? I'm going to throw on top of that, because I'm stealing ideas today. What it is people from, like, we should sit at the table as persons living with disabilities, but just diverse people, like, culturally diverse, any other kind of identities, because it shouldn't just be one voice of people with disabilities, right?
I agree. Yeah.
These conversations should be had. So it should be a United Nations of just different identities around a table at Kamini's restaurant. You know what I mean?
Okay, now you're making people believe I have a restaurant. And I don't.
Don't worry. At the end of the episode, I'll get you to promote your restaurant. Funny. But all jokes aside, I'm going to go into the final question, and I'm going to throw this to you as well, Neisha, in terms of Trinidad. So is there any aspects of Canada when it does come to sight loss that you would like to bring back to Guyana? And for you, Neisha, Trinidad. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Neisha, and then.
I would like to see more like accessibility features in and around, in the city, the infrastructure. There are traffic lights. That's like a new thing. It feels like in the last maybe 20 or 30 years, there are traffic lights, there are crossing, crosswalks. I would like to see, if possible, the APS or some version of it, their version of it in Trinidad. I think when it comes to roads and sidewalks being leveled with the street, that is probably never going to happen. It's a whole country that it's like that. So I would like to see some sort of, training. Well, they probably do this, but I would like to see more of an acceptance of people with sight loss using their cane when navigating these streets. Here in Toronto, we have the ambassadors program through CNIB. If more people with sight loss in Trinidad were out and about in the community, showing themselves more, there'll be more of an acceptance from the public and and allowing them to, navigate independently on their own, and finally work programs outside of the training programs that they have where they make baskets. I'm wondering if there are other training programs out there to get people with sight loss more involved in careers that they're really interested in and they want to thrive in. So I'm not sure if they are, and if there is, that's great, but that's what I would want to take to Trinidad.
All right. I definitely do agree with all of what Neisha's saying. Yeah, I don't really think it's realistic to expect them to change the roads and all that, but having at least street lights or a walkway for people to cross would definitely help. That way there's somewhere that's designated for crossing, and it'll make things at least a little bit safer. But yeah, in order to have all these other programs, I think she said more people with sight loss needs to be out there, but in order for them to go out there and show themselves and talk, they need to be encouraged. Because I know for me, I grew up being very discouraged by my family to do anything, and it really can take a toll on you in a very negative way. So a little encouragement goes a long way. I think if people can be more open-minded and encourage people to go out there and take part in life and include them in life and have them do things, that would really help. And of course, the education system is a huge thing. Even if they had even one teacher in one area trained per school, even that would help to be able to work with people with vision loss. So I feel that there's a lot of conversations, advocacy, and training that needs to be done in order for people to be able to have any kind of life there, let alone an independent life, whether it's having some sort of education by going to school and being able to work and have a job after that and support yourself and contribute to your family and whatever else you aspire to do with your life.
You know what? I say we throw myself out of this podcast. We get you to host it for now. No, beautiful words.
Well, what about you, Ben? What would you take back to I was going to say Guyana.
Ghana.
What did I say, Neisha, at the beginning of the episode? What did I say?
Sorry.
I get the same thing too. People like Ghana, no, Guyana and Ghana.
Yeah, so definitely you both hit the nail on the head. Something that was really telling from Kamini when you did mention how they brought people from outside the country. And I believe that's the approach where people do, where they bring people outside the country, but I feel like they should utilize those professionals as consultation instead of like taking on, okay, we're going to bring you from Canada and you're going to teach, right? Because I feel like there's a chance where the culture will be lost, right? Like I'm going to teach it in the North American way, forget the way you have learned all these years. So I think it's very important to educate within the communities. Definitely normalizing sight loss, right? Like you said, Kamini, infrastructure is not going to change overnight. Never. Even we'll be lucky if infrastructure would change in like 10 years, right? But I think even not just giving up on the individuals with disabilities, right? And not getting them to hide it. And the one thing I really love about the cane, as much as everybody, the cane, it's universal. So people still do know about the cane. So just education, I feel like even as my responsibility too, is to give back to that community. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would take back for sure. Yeah, and definitely, like I said, after After that, I would head to Kamini's restaurant,
Oh God.
kick back my feet, and know that I did a hard day of work for sure. So
Better start cooking.
with that said, any last comments for you, Kamini? We're running out of time. I don't want it to be running out of time because we just had such a great conversation with you. So any last words, anything you would like to let the listeners know about, like living abroad, or just anything?
Well, I just really, really want to thank you for this opportunity because I think conversations are great. It's one of the biggest ways that we can bring about change by talking about it and having these conversations. And I look forward to having more conversation like this. But as I said, I guess my biggest thing is encouragement, because I know I had a lot of outside encouragement from my teachers and anyone who worked with me. And I think that's what kind of brought me to where I am now. So I think everybody needs a little encouragement. And if you see someone that's struggling, try to talk to them and try to give them a little encouragement, and you'll see how happy and how much of a difference it'll make to them. And yeah, thank you guys again. Thank you both for having me on. It's been great. I like having conversations.
You are definitely a shining star for sure, Kamini. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I guess this is the end. Thank you everybody for listening to The Lens. Before we let you go, Neisha, what do you want to tell the listeners?
Well, I want to tell the listeners, if you have any topic suggestions, guest suggestions, ideas, feedback, any thing you want to share with us about what you're hearing on today's episode or previous episodes, please send us an email at advocacy@cnib.ca.
Excellent. I couldn't say that any better myself. So thank you everybody for listening. I was one of your hosts, Ben.
I'm your co-host, Neisha.
Peace.
Bye.